When I was 18 months old, my mother had a schizophrenic break and divorced my father and totally destroyed my family. My whole life's trajectory was completely torn apart, changed, whatever you want to call it. She then went on to get a restraining order against my father, accused him of all kinds of shit that I know he didn't do because I read the paperwork that said he didn't do it much later on in my life. She went on to be the worst mother ever. Like, I have not met very many mothers that were worse than mine, just short of mothers who like kill their own children, right? That's a little bit worse than mine because my mother didn't actually kill me. She just threatened to, and she just threatened to kill me to a federal government or whatever, state government, the CPS agents. She threatened to kill me to the CPS agents. She didn't actually kill me. So I do understand if your mother actually kills you, yeah, she's probably worse than mine. But she also went on to keep me from meeting my father until I was 15. So when I was in middle school, my sister actually ran away to live with him. She was 17 at the time, and in the state of Oregon, if you are 17 years old and with a biological parent, you are not considered a runaway. So there was absolutely nothing my mother could do to get my sister back at that point, even though she tried, even though she paid her lawyer a bunch of money to try, whatever. So my sister, when I was in middle school, then she would like call on the phone and I would talk to my father, which we were not allowed to do legally. Like my mother had a restraining order against my father and I was not supposed to talk to him. He wasn't supposed to talk to me. He had no contact order with us unless there was supervision. So like there were a few times in my very early childhood where, you know, my mother was like scrapbooking and she was like, okay, you can talk to your father. Right? You guys can talk to him and he can talk about like, oh, it's happy birthday, whatever. So like there were a few times when I had that as a child and it wasn't very frequent. Like I want to say it wasn't even once a year. Like the number of times I had a phone call conversation with my father as a child growing up was very low. And then when I was in middle school, my sister lived with him, she would call us. And so we would, I have two sisters, so it's my oldest sister and then my middle sister. So my oldest sister would call us, me and my middle sister, that middle sister and me, we would talk on the phone from my mother's house, my oldest sister and my father's house, and we would have conversations with my father, and I got to know him a little bit more that way. And of course at that time he was on his best behavior and he wasn't gonna be an asshole to us, but at that time it was mostly him trying to explain to us like what happened with our mother when I was 18 months old, right? When I was 3 years old, like what was going on in my mother's life, what was going on in my life, like how things transpired. And that was when I was introduced to the idea that she was a schizophrenic, and I did eventually see the paperwork that he gave me later, but I didn't know before that, so there's a lot of things I didn't know, and so he was really explaining things to me in my life that were difficult for me, that were confusing to me, and that clarity he gave me was great, but I feel like it also maybe made me feel like he was going to be a better father than he ended up being, because when I was 15 years old, my oldest sister came and got me. Now, we lived in different states. I lived in Washington. I grew up in Seattle, in that Seattle area. My father lived in Oregon. So, and he retained his status in Oregon because in the state of Oregon, if you get divorced, then the custody case will stay in Oregon even if you move away. And now he knew my mother was going to move back up to Washington, back up to Seattle where all the family was. So he stayed in Oregon just to retain like the courts down there, retain the custody courts down in Oregon so that he could get custody of us back at one point. Now, he only ever got custody of me back because I was the youngest. I have 3 older siblings and I was the youngest. So when I was in high school, my freshman year of high school, I asked my sister, hey, can you come get me? I don't want to live here anymore. I can't live with our mother. Come get me. And so she drove up to Washington State, She picked me up, drove me back down to Oregon, and I met my father for the first time. And I say first time even though like I had contact with him up until the age of 3, but I don't remember him from that time. I don't remember my father. I have maybe a little like glimpse of a memory from when I was very young, but as a child I didn't realize that was a memory. I thought that was a dream I had, and then I didn't think of it really as a memory until actually after I met my husband, and I talked to my husband about it years later. But as a child I did not remember my father. So I say I met my father for the first time at 15. I was like maybe 14 because my freshman year of high school. It was over winter break, and it was good to meet him the first time. He was very loving to me the first time we met, and I had no idea who he was. It was like a stranger. I really, even though I talked to him on the phone, it was really like, you know, you were told somebody was your parent, maybe you saw pictures of them, which I hadn't. I didn't even know what my father looked like at the time. I'd never really seen a picture of him. But it's like if you were online, right? You were on Facebook or something and you were told, oh, that's your father. And then you talk to that guy a few times, and let's say you even like call him up on the phone. You're like talking on the phone. And then all of a sudden you meet him for the first time and it's like, I have no idea who you are. Like, you don't feel like my father. Like, this isn't what I thought having a father would feel like. So it was strange, I want to say. I was relieved to be away from my mother for wasn't even 24 hours. It was less than that before the cops came and dragged me back. And then there was a lot of issues with that. I'm not happy with the way they dealt with that, you know. The Justice Department does have its issues. But yeah, so I met him for the first time when I was like 14, and then I got dragged back to my mother's house, blah, blah, blah. Had to be forced to go live with her. They sent like a cop out like a few days later to come talk to me, whatever. And I was like, no, I hate my mother. I don't want to live with her. And then, because in the state of Washington, if you run away over state lines, you are considered an at-risk youth, right? So I was put in this like youth program with the criminal justice department with like people who steal, people who do drugs, like people who don't go to school, like bad kids. Like I was a good kid. I was really a good kid. Yes, I had anger issues, but that's because of my mother and the situation I was placed in growing up. But I in general, I was a good kid. I didn't do drugs. I didn't skip school. I didn't sleep around. Like I wasn't a bad kid. I really just wanted to keep to myself. I wanted to paint, I wanted to sew, I wanted to read a book, I wanted to do like my crafts. I really just wanted to be left alone and left to do my like creative projects. And so I was put in this program, and I ended up having to go to court like once a month to literally talk about why I didn't want to do the dishes. Talk about fighting with my siblings, which is totally normal. And I missed so much school from this. It was so stupid. But they had the court, because of the at-risk youth thing, they court ordered me to go see this like family therapist who essentially started crying and kicked me out of the room every time I had to go, because I was like, I don't want to live with my mother, I don't like my brother, my sister's sitting in the chair I want, I'm gonna kick her out physically, I'm gonna pick her up and kick her out. Like they didn't he didn't appreciate that. But he would just start crying rather than, like, he was the only therapist that never asked me to sit in the room alone and just like talk to me, and never asked me my point of view. Never, like, I don't think he ever even understood anything about me because he didn't try, and he was terrible. So that guy clearly wasn't working. So my mother had like always forced me to go to therapy. So she ended up finally taking me to a psychiatrist and a psychologist who were like a team, and they worked together. And I actually liked them. But so I was seeing them like in conjunction with this family therapist guy, and like essentially she took me there thinking they were gonna diagnose me with something, and that they were gonna prescribe a medication, prescribe a treatment, and then I was gonna be drugged up like all my siblings and just give in and stop fighting back, essentially, and just do what she did to my siblings, which was get them to, I don't know if it was like she broke down their willpower, or if it was the drugs, or if it was like a combination of the two, or maybe they just didn't have the same personality I do, because I know I'm very different than my siblings, and I've lived my life very different than my siblings even now. But I refused. I absolutely refused. And the only medications that, because they told my mother, right, I'm a good student, I don't have a lot of friends, and I do have problems with people at school, but I do have friends, right? And then they're like, okay, so when we're looking at a mental illness, we want problems in all 3 areas. I have 2 areas where I don't feel like I have a problem there. It's fine. I am only acknowledging that there's a problem at home. That's that 3rd area. And my mother says, oh, well, yeah, there's a problem at home, blah, 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 blah. So we're all agreeing there's just a problem at home. Like, school is fine. I have good grades. I have friends. Even though I'm getting bullied, whatever, I'm not, like, crying about being bullied. Like, I was okay being bullied. Not okay, but, like, I dealt with it in my own way. And that's, like, its own thing. So they were like, no problem at school, no problem with friends, just a problem at home. So she was trying to get me like diagnosed with something, and they're like, no, we can't diagnose her with anything. The only thing that they could do was say I was sleeping about 5 hours a week, because I couldn't sleep with my mother in the house. Like, my freshman year of high school, I just couldn't be around her. And like, I want to explain it this way. One of the creepiest things my mother ever told me was, I came and checked on you last night while you were sleeping. And normally, like, that would be fine for a parent to do, fine for a parent to say, but I didn't sleep that night. I just want that to sink in. So, I didn't sleep very much at all that year, and my grades actually did struggle from it, and I did retreat from my friend group a little bit that year. But the only thing that they did prescribe me was melatonin to try and get me to sleep more, because they were like, here's a graph of like your age and how much you should sleep. And like, clearly I was in like the bottom 1%. I wasn't sleeping enough. They're like, you are sleeping so poorly, like you're gonna need to sleep for a year to like make up for all the sleep debt you have. So she tried to force me into taking this melatonin, and I was like, no, I can't sleep with my mother in the house. I don't want to sleep with my mother in the house. So I would take the pills, I go over to the like bathroom, and I'd spit them into the toilet, go to the bathroom, flush it, and they were gone. So I refused. I absolutely refused to take that medication. But they ultimately, because they weren't bad, like the psychiatrist and the psychologist duo, not the family therapist guy, they were ultimately able to see me for who I am and see my mother for who she is. And they were able to convince her that like the reason why we have so many problems in our relationship is because we just couldn't live together. We just could not do that. So they convinced her to give custody of me to my dad when I was 15 years old. Well, I'm probably done talking about this for today, so if you guys have any questions, feel free to ask them down below. I will answer every question you guys ask me, and I will be truthful as I can be about it. So feel free, go ahead, ask your wildest questions. If you guys have any comments or have like a similar situation or want to share your experience, leave that down below. Like I said, I'm gonna read all these comments. I will reply to every single one of them. And I'm gonna like maybe make a video on it. If you guys have any topics you want me to make a video on, or I think any topic you leave down below would be good for a video, I'll make a video on it. So if you guys are interested, hit that subscribe button, hit that like button, and maybe I'll see you next time.